Hello, I'm Waqar Rizvi, and this is Scope. In the first segment of today's show, we're going to discuss Iraq and the ongoing political crisis there. As some of you may know, Iraqi parliament late on Tuesday approved a new election law that would pave the way for greater inclusion of independent candidates and dismantles, to an extent, a system that had been put in place since, of course, the U.S. got involved in that country. Now, an Iranian-backed bloc, that's at least what it's called by much of the mainstream media, in the Iraqi parliament on Wednesday nominated Asad al-Adani, the governor of the southern province of Basra, as the new prime minister. That's a move that's been rejected by many protesters who've in fact demanded a complete overhaul of this political system, which puts in place sectarian quotas, really, and specific sectarian agendas for specific positions throughout that country. Let's discuss that a bit further. We're joined now by Mohammed Hussein, who is the policy director at the Iraqi Center for Policy Analysis and Research, which is an independent research center. He's joining us now from Sulaymaniyah. Mohammed, thank you for your time today. What do you make of the new electoral law, as well as the nomination of Asad al-Adani?
The new electoral law could be good. One is it associated with a set of legal reforms and other laws that help implementing this law in Iraqi politics and in the upcoming elections. But to expect this law just change the whole political landscape in Iraq, it's kind of overestimating. But for sure, this law addresses one of the key demands of the protesters, and it also helped bringing back the things that went wrong on its right track in Baghdad politics and Najaf politics, especially the provisions that allow voters to vote for the legislators directly, right, and not the political parties listed, and reducing the electoral districts to something smaller than provinces. These are what the protesters demanded, and these are what reformists in Iraq are trying to realize. But again, this law cannot help achieving anything alone. With this law, we need to have a set of legal reforms and a set of procedural reforms that help implementing this law and that help getting rid of partially of the political elite and the leadership that has run Iraq in the past 15 years.
All right, so we're also joined now by Ahmed Rushdi, who is a senior foreign policy advisor to the Speaker of the Iraqi Parliament. He is joining us now from the Iraqi capital, Baghdad. Ahmed, as always, we appreciate your time. What do you make of the new election law? What do you make of the nomination of Asad al-Adani?
First of all, let us agree on something very important, is that still we have two main partners. The first one is the demonstrators, and the second one is the political blocs. And it looks like that the political blocs, until now, their mindset is before the 1st of October. So, and what's happening now is that by time they are losing more and more power. And I think what happened yesterday is one of the victories for the demonstrators, is that they actually made some sort of a huge pressure on the political blocs to accept this electoral law. So in a way or another, it's more progress for the demonstrators, more losing of power for the blocs. This is first. Secondly, I don't know if Asad al-Adani really nominated from the president, because until now there are so many demonstrators, especially in Basra, against nominating Asad al-Adani. And I'm wondering why always the Fatah is looking for persons who already managed to be inside the system, and there are so many talks about corruption and so on. So why they are always insisting on those persons, I don't know actually. The only definition for something like that is that it's still their mindset before the 1st of October. I don't think they are managing themselves in a way to know is that it's now different. It's totally different. It's a way of knowing exactly what's happening in Iraq. So it shows you that maybe the Marja'iyya will will end up the whole issue tomorrow by asking for early elections. So when they there will be some sort of asking of early elections. That means it should be done as fast as possible, which I think it will be in a way or another. Maybe in about, let's say, less than 6 months.
Yeah. Okay, so Mohammed, at some level, the argument that you can't just dismantle a complete system and put in a new system overnight, that makes sense, right? So do you think the demonstrators are being kind of naive and expecting that all of this can just change? Doesn't this need to be a step-by-step process?
I think most of the protest organizers and leaders of the grassroots demonstrations realized that it's not possible to change the entire political system overnight and even in one step. So they are currently expecting some gradual change that could put things on their right tracks. I mean, they need a fair election law that prevents the level of electoral fraud that we saw in the past election. This is not too much. They also need to have access to have a normal participation in the election. They need to let independent candidates participate, and this is also something not too much to expect and to demand after sacrificing all those lives in Iraq in the past 2 months. I mean, the protest leaders are actually realistic. Well, they came and they start with some idealistic and overestimating demands, but now they are dealing with the system and they are giving feedback day after day to the candidates the political blocs show and to the changes the parliament. For example, they just welcomed the legal change and the legal reform they did with the electoral law.
But then they rejected Asad al-Idani, haven't they, Mohammed?
So the first day of the protests, they have rejected any name, any candidate from the current political elite. And for them, Asad al-Idani is just another version of Adil Abdul Mahdi. So what is the point? Replacing Adil Abdul Mahdi with Asad al-Idani, it's meaningless change for them. That's why they rejected him, and they rejected the previous names before al-Idani, like Hussein and the other one. So these changes cannot make sense for them because they need someone independent and someone outside of the political elite to lead the transition government. And for us, they need an interim government that pave the way to the upcoming election and help Iraqis have a fair and free election. Okay. They don't believe that someone like Asad al-Idani and Hussein can be such a candidate or such a leader for this transition government. That's why I think they are expecting someone who could be more suitable than anyone from the current political elite.
Okay,
but it doesn't mean that they're
I understand. Ahmed, let me come to you then. What do you think the alliance led by Muqtada al-Sadr will do now? Because Muqtada al-Sadr originally, when this electoral law came out, said that this was going to root out corruption and corrupt parties and corrupt politicians. Will he now ensure that? Will the Sairun alliance, which he heads, ensure that? Because to the best of my knowledge, he has not yet reacted to the Bina bloc discussing Asad al-Idani.
Well, and let's also agree about something is that Muqtada al-Sadr is already making lots of changes in Sairun. He already demolished Sairun, and he said you should be with the demonstrators. That means he's asking his followers to be inside the demonstrations, and I think it is for electoral issue because now we all know that Sairun will get the majority inside the parliamentary and also provincial elections. So it's a way of getting rid of all political parties and get the majority inside the new political elite. Now, the most important thing is that the Marji'iyya, I think, accepting something like that, pushing hard to get rid of old faces and start to see new faces and start to make some sort of a deal with them. And all those issues, let us not forget, is that it's not only Sairun. We have also the communists and we have the secular movements and the blocks also with Sairun. So they are some sort of the stream of the demonstrations. They are already managing the stream of the demonstrations. Now, the most important thing is that even if Asad al-Aidani will come, I think what Fatah is want is, or what Bina wants from someone like Asad al-Aidani is that they think that he will make some sort of a change about the reputation of Fatah, the reputation of Bina. And the most important thing, the reputation of the Hashid, because, the Hashid now reputation is not very good, because of what's happening, because of the blame is that they use the snipers against the demonstrators and so on. So what Bina and Fatah need, it's more time and Prime Minister from them to try to manage things with their own people, with their own grassroots, especially in the south, and to try to manage things from this Prime Minister, because he will as they think, he will get the power to manage all those problems that happen in the south. And we all know now the south does not have infrastructure, does not have some sort of services, has a lot of or a high rate of unemployment and so on. So they think that if someone came from them to be the Prime Minister and he will gain time like 1 year, he can change things in 1 year in a way they will restore their own reputation as a Bina, as a Fatah, and as a Hashid. And I don't think it is right. That's why I'm saying is that they are thinking before the 1st of October. Because I don't think elections will be held in 1 year. I think the minimum, it will be 2 months. The maximum, it will be 4 months. That's it. Because the demonstrators cannot stay for a long time in the streets. So they're going to push. And I think also with the help of the Marja'iyah to try to manage it in 2 months.
Okay, so Mohammed, how do you see this moving forward then? Because if we are not able to agree on somebody to lead the country, even through an interim period, that leaves sort of a power vacuum, right? Is there somebody else to come in? Because that's always a concern, right? In a country like Iraq, or in any country really. There is the system in place. It can't just dismantle overnight. Somebody needs to lead the country. Of course, you have the President, Barham Saleh, still in place, but you need somebody to be in the Prime Minister post, of course. It can't just be a vacuum, certainly. The protesters can't just keep rejecting.
Well, of course, it cannot be like any power vacuum. And of course, there are a lot of people in Iraq. They could be a suitable interim prime minister. So the problem is not lacking qualified people. The problem is the current ruling elite still insisting on putting someone in charge that we already have bad experiences with them. Like Iraqi protesters and Iraqi people already have bad experience with them. The equation is quite simple. We have protesters and most of the opposition and opposition groups and political groups, they want someone independent and they want someone outside of the ruling elite to lead this interim government or this transitional government. But in the other side, we still have the current ruling elite. They still want to put someone within the same elite in charge to lead the transitional government. This is the dilemma. The thing is that the protesters and the protest leaders believe that with a weak prime minister in this interim government and with someone in the same current political elite, we will come back to the same status quo in 6 months or in 1 year until the upcoming election, because they will keep the same patronage networks of the political parties in the institutions. They will let the same political groups to manipulate the public fund and the public institutions in favor of their candidates. Then we will reproduce the same political situation and the same political dilemma in 1 year or in 6 months. That's why who will lead this interim government is quite important for protesters and for the government leaders and the ruling elite who are leading the Iraqi politics right now.
All right, so before I go, I want to give you a final comment, Ahmed. There's a lot of discussion, Ahmed, about foreign and external influence on Iraqi politics, and the name of Iran comes up a lot. But then very few people are talking about the fact that this system, this political system that has been put in place, was not put in place by Iran. It was actually put in place by the United States when it got involved in Iraq, especially after the fall of Saddam Hussein, of course. Why isn't that discussed more, and how important is it to correct the narrative on that issue?
Waqar, it's not. I don't think it's working like that. I think everyone agreed on this political process and also agreed to accept this political process. Now, the most important thing is that Iraq has a financial problem. So I think now any prime minister now, he will think a lot about balancing the relationship with the United States and with the West, which I think it's supposed will happen if someone will come from Cairo, because they know that it's very important to have a balanced relationship between Iran and America, and also a balanced relationship between Iran and the Arab states, especially the Gulf states like Saudi Arabia and Emirates. And also the most important thing is that who will fill the gap of the Iranian withdrawal from Iraq, if we're going to count it about, let's say, 30-40%.
Very well. We'll leave there as a final comment for Ahmed and Mohammed. Well, thank you both, of course, for your time and your insight. Viewers, I'll be back, though, continuing this discussion on this issue right after this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, viewers. We're still here in Scope, and we're continuing to discuss the situation in Iraq and the new electoral law, as well as a possible new nominee for Prime Minister, for interim Prime Minister, at least, in that country. To discuss this further, we're now joined by Azhar Al-Rubaie, who is a journalist from Basra, and we're also joined by Ali Al-Bayati, who is a member of the Iraqi Human Rights Commission, and he's joining us from the Iraqi capital, Baghdad. Ali and Azhar, thank you both for your time today. Ali Al-Bayati, I'd like to start with you. What do you make of the new electoral law? Is it enough?
Of course, what happened yesterday is a new change, or it's a positive change toward strengthening the electoral law. You know that this law will be responsible of establishing all the system, including the parliament, and create or form the new government. So what happened, the system transferred from a single governorate-based electoral circle or unit to district-based, and it will depend on the size of the district, whether it is less than 100,000 or more. So each district will have either 1 or 2 seats according to the size of the district. I think it will give an opportunity for the candidate to nominate or to be nominated alone, even personally, without the need for the to be part of the party, of any party. It will make the need for the money less, and it will cut the foreign money coming from outside. It will make the contact between the candidates and the community much better. And I think for those districts which with small sizes, as there will be a need for merging more than one district to reach to the number of 100,000 for each seat, I think this will strengthen the local, social, and regional relation, because each candidate will need more votes to reach to the level of gaining the seat.
Okay, so Azhar, do you agree? Do you like this new election law as well?
Yes. Basically, I somehow I like this new electoral law because it's considered one of the protesters' demand they are seeking for. once the protests began in Basra in October 1. So the electoral law allows to the people to choose the individuals instead of the group of the parties list. So I think it's a good one, and we have to keep demanding the other things and other reforms to push and pressure on the government to do a lot of things. But as you know, the protesters took to the street to ask for the overhaul and entire political system change. So that's, even there is a new electoral law, but that didn't guarantee to the protesters to go back home. So yes, I think it's a good one, and we have to keep going and demand more actions.
Ali, do you agree with the protest? Because I wonder, you can't just change a political system overnight in one step, right? This needs to be a step-by-step process. This will take time.
Yeah, of course, I agree. There is a big difference between the political system and the tools or corrupt tools used for the political system. I think the system is a democratic system, and there is maybe some need for change in the constitution. Otherwise, it is one of the unique systems in the region. It is, of course, best than other systems. I mean, the political systems of the regional countries. But the problem in the tools used in such system, there is a lot of corruption. There is a lot of corrupt parties or figures in the system. So what we need now to send some new and good people to the parliament, and after that, of course, to be responsible of creation of the new government and the new institutions. Otherwise, I think the system is unique in Iraq, and we need to keep it. And I agree for some possible changes in the constitution in the future.
What do you think of that, Azhar? Because there is this argument that, okay, we change the system, but then what happens? Who fills those seats? Because if we're asking all of the ruling elite to step away right now, won't that leave a vacuum?
Yes, I think that's the one of the most important questions on the street. The people are asking for the entire government change, but personally, I don't think so, and I'm not sure who will replace the government. But right now, what the people they are asking for is the new prime minister, who will replace Adel Abdel Mahdi, who will fill the seat of Abdel Mahdi. I think the first step that the government have to do is choose a prime minister from the streets, not from their own parts or Iran-backed militias leaders or something like that. So if you want to calm the people and make the street is less anger, you have to choose a prime minister right now. The government just nominates some of the politicians. They are just old ones, and the people didn't agree with them because they are violated and accused to be violated the protesters and killing thousands of the people. For example, Asad al-Idani, governor of Basra, he is since years ago he is a governor of Basra, and now some of the parties nominated him and put him in the list of the new prime minister, and who will be replaced Adel Abdel Mahdi. That's why people now in Basra and other southern part of the Iraq, like also Baghdad, people are refusing and rejecting anyone that came from the same parties. They are asking for the one who is from the favor of the people, not favor of the government or outside pressure.
All right, so Ali, a lot of people are saying that we should be looking towards Muqtada al-Sadr as well as Ayatollah Sistani and the Marja'iyya to see what direction they want the country to go in, because Sairun Alliance, for example, holds a lot of influence in the country. And Muqtada al-Sadr has also supported, of course, the electoral law, saying it will get rid of corruption. Even Ayatollah Sistani in his Friday sermons has repeatedly asked for new elections to be held very quickly and has supported the protesters. What kind of influence do you think that these two figures will have going forward?
I think regardless of names, of course, we have now some protests on the ground, and they are the Iraqi people, and they are asking for correction or reforming the system. And I think, according to all democratic system, the people have the authority, or they are responsible of giving the authority or mandate for any government, for any parliament. For the political parties, they must listen to the street, and they must reform the system, knowing that they are part of that corruption. So it is a complex equation, actually. So we should do a balance between what the people need and what the political parties scare from. You know that the request coming from the protesters is to reform all the system or clean all the political parties, and this is of course not accepted from that side. So also adding on this equation, high number of protesters have been killed over 3 months. We have now around 489 protesters have been killed, including 15 of them security members. So this is not a small number. Also, with not less than 22,000 of protesters have been injured. Yeah. So the equation is very risky and dangerous. So I think what happened now, and it is for the interest of the protester, first we have a prime minister resigned, and this actually made the political system to be changed. So what's called tawafuq, which means that all the political groups coming together for one agreement, and this means that there will be no any accountability, no any fighting for the corruption. This actually have been broken now. The second step done, and it is positive for the side of the protesters, is the correction or the amendment of the law. So we have two important steps have done. What we need to add now, first of all, to have an accountability of the criminals who killed the protesters. It's very important.
Of course.
Because we are talking about tens of thousands of Iraqi families suffering now, and they lost or they have some of their members injured. So we should deal with that in fair way. We need accountability, and I think this government cannot do it. We are waiting the next government or the new government to do it, whether it is transitional or
Ali, I'm going to interrupt you just because we're running out of time. I apologize. I want to give the final word to you, Azhar. There's a lot of talk, Azhar, and there's a lot of criticism of the Bina bloc, for example, their connections to IHCHR or the popular mobilization units. And of course, there's a lot of criticism of Iran as well. But do you think that there should also be criticism of the US for making the system the way it is to begin with?
Yes, I think after 2003, Iran and other countries just exploit the political vacuum in Iraq, and they are just want to make pressure and want to enter the Iraq political system. I think Iran is the biggest supporter for the politicians right now, because most of the politicians in the government and in the cabinet and also the permanent parliaments, they are backed and belong to the Iran. So Iran have a vital role to influence and to choose who will replace Abdul Mahdi or who is not. Also, when the ISIS entered Iraq and occupied the third part of the Iraq, Iran sent their fighters to fight ISIS. That's why the parliament passed a law to legalize the popular mobilization forces, and now the IHCHR or the militias have the decision, and most of the leaders in the IHCHR and militia, they are lawmakers in the government. So I think the challenges is very dangerous, and the future of the protest is still unknown.
Okay, we'll leave it there at that. But of course, appreciate both of you for your time and, of course, your insight. That was Azhar Al-Rubaie speaking to us from Basra and Ali Al-Bayati speaking to us from Baghdad. Now, viewers, as all four of our guests, Ahmed, Mohammed, Azhar, and Ali, have outlined. The electoral law itself is a good thing, or the changes to the electoral law in the country are certainly a good thing. The changes in the constitution were needed. But can the whole system be changed overnight? That's not really a practical demand, is it? Even though the protesters are standing strong and asking for all the ruling elite to go, certainly this needs to be a step-by-step process, doesn't it? It can't just happen in one step or in one night. So what is wrong with Asad al-Idani taking over as even an interim prime minister or somebody else? Can somebody just from the street, or part of the street protest, I should say, be picked up and made prime minister? Is it as simple as that? Certainly not. So a lot, of course, still to be seen. Tomorrow is Friday, and we'll have to wait and see how the Marja'iyah, as one of our guests mentioned, will react to this, or the religious leadership, I should say, Ayatul Sistani, as well as Muqtada al-Sadr, who leads the Sayrun Alliance, how they'll react to the nominations of the people that have been put forth right now, and what then will happen on the street. Will the street give some time to the government to finally reform itself? We'll keep an eye on that, of course, here in Scope. I'll be back, though, with my final segment after this break. Welcome back, viewers. You're still here in Scope with me, Waqar Rizvi. In this final segment of today's show, we're going to discuss the ICC war crimes case that had been brought forth by Palestine against Israel. Now, of course, this is an important case. Israel rejecting now the decision by the ICC to even launch that investigation, that long-standing investigation that had been demanded, as said, by Palestinians from a number of years ago. The ICC prosecutor, Fatou Bensouda, has decided that she will now go ahead with that war crimes probe. She may also include Hamas, which, as you know, rules Gaza at this point in time, in this investigation, but it has rubbed Israel the wrong way, saying that the court simply doesn't have jurisdiction because, in its eyes, Palestine is not a state officially. Will those official and these fine print details spoil this case at this time, or will it actually hold Israel to account, as well as Palestinian groups to account as well? That's an important question, which I'm sure a lot of people who follow the issue of Israel-Palestine closely will be watching, of course, as to see how it plays out. Let's discuss that a bit further. We're joined now by Daniel Fridberg, who is a peace-building practitioner, trainer, and consultant. He's joining us now from New Zealand. Daniel, as always, we appreciate your time. What do you make of the ICC finally, in some words, opening this investigation, and how Israel has reacted?
Well, I just want to open by saying that I'm not a legal expert as such, but I'm more than happy to talk about political implications and potential consequences. So to start this discussion, it's important to emphasize that the prosecutor of the International Court has moved it to the court's decision to see if it has jurisdiction in the West Bank and Gaza. So a decision to start investigation hasn't been made. She made a recommendation, this is what I understand, to start the investigation, given that the International Court agrees that it is in its jurisdiction.
And that's a fair point. I'm glad you clarified that. But nevertheless, as I said, of course, Israel has reacted quite negatively to this, saying that, this shouldn't have gone through. And Netanyahu has even, I believe, at some level called this an anti-Semitic decision as well. Do you agree with that? Do you think that there should be an investigation?
Well, I think that the arguments that are made and the evidence that obviously exists are very concerning. And I think there's always a room for an external eye. I think the recommendation to take this into an investigation, it really indicates that there is a loss of faith in the international community in Israel's ability and willingness to investigate itself. And this is much what it's about. Obviously, Hamas is not a recognized country, so Hamas members will possibly be investigated and prosecuted individually, while Israel is being seen as a country, as a state that's a responsible entity, an official entity, of course. Now, in Israel, there's a lot of resentment towards international voices that perhaps in Israelis' eyes judge Israel not as I'm choosing my words here, but perhaps not as equally as other countries that don't respect human rights and interfere with international law. And Israel keeps arguing that there is a double standard when it comes to its action in the occupied territories.
Do you think that there, I mean, I know you're not an expert in law, of course, but just in your opinion, do you think that there is a double standard? Because on the other side, you know the argument well, Daniel, that many of the Palestinians themselves would say, or those who support Palestine would say, listen, it's in fact Israel which sort of has this cover because of the power of the United States, for example, at the United Nations Security Council, the veto power that it wields, which, according to many, would give Israel not carte blanche necessarily, but quite significant cover to do as it so wishes.
Well, in my personal opinion, everyone here suffers from double standards. And that's one of the problems, because in this kind of political reality, it's very hard to be consistent in these matters. So at the same time, things that Israel says and does unilaterally against international covenants, against agreements that Israel has signed on itself with the highest ranked politicians, ministers, and prime minister who keep declaring that their ultimate goal is to annex the West Bank, possibly Gaza. They're not talking about Gaza so much anymore, but definitely the West Bank and its settlements. They stand against every understanding of international law and of the international community of what this conflict is about. And so they have double standards. America and Israel have double standards as well. And it's a lose-lose game in that sense.
And of course, in the middle of all, as always, are the Palestinian people, as well as Israelis, who, live in this perpetual state of instability, seemingly, really. Do you think, what kind of effect do you think such a case, either way it goes, whether it's admissible or not, and if it is, then, if it goes through and there's war crimes found on both sides or either side, how does this affect just any chances for peace? Because that's seemingly, at least, the world's ultimate goal for this region.
Well, the way I understand it, the Palestinian people as a nation, but also as individuals, they're desperate and they're trying everything and anything that is not violent resistance. Very small fraction, especially in Gaza, still are going for the violent resistant option, but the majority and the consensus in the Palestinian street says that we need to choose any non-violent tool we may have. This means supporting the BDS movement. This means going to international court, try to argue that there are human rights violations that are not being observed and followed by anyone. And they're trying whatever they can. They're really desperate. And in that sense, I'm very sympathetic towards that.
All right, so then what do you think will happen, realistically speaking, of course, when we're talking about a court case like this? This will be long and stretched out. Certainly, if this does, of course, even go through to begin with. Australia, for example, has rejected this. Germany has said that it's confident the ICC judges will address the issues of admissibility and has, cautioned against politicization, which I don't know how you cannot politicize this issue because it is a political issue, seemingly from the beginning. This sort of, at some level, possibly hurts the cause, doesn't it?
I don't know if it hurts the cause necessarily, but I don't think it's a good idea to move the political process that should take place, although it doesn't, to legal level, because as sad as I am to admit, Israeli legal case is pretty strong. The question of jurisdiction, the question of Palestine as a recognized non-member state of the UN suffers some substance to really make it enough credibility for this case. I assume that eventually the international court either decides that it doesn't have jurisdiction or that they move it to the non-criminal Court of Human Rights, sitting also in Hague. I don't see it following up to actually prosecution process against either Israeli or Palestinian officials.
Right, but then you know the political realities on the ground too, then Daniel, certainly. The Israeli, I don't want to say entire society, but it seems that Israel is moving in an ever more right-wing direction. Is it realistic to expect that the solution really lies within such a situation?
Oh, no, I'm afraid no. We're not talking about solution anymore. We're talking about some sort of stabilization for very short term. This is all that people are looking for and at the moment on both Israeli and Palestinian sides. Unfortunately, long-term ideas about lasting peace, such as the Arab initiative from 2002, have not been accepted by Israel and were not followed up by anyone, basically. So I don't think realistically there is much of a hope for a fruitful peace process at this time.
Very well, Daniel. We'll leave it there. But of course, we appreciate you taking your time out, especially of your holiday season, to speak to us here in Scope and to share your thoughts with us on this issue of the ICC investigation, which may, of course, as Daniel had correctly there said, may be opened if ICC judges do decide to even open it. This has, at this point in time, just been a recommendation to the ICC on the part of Fatou Bensouda, who is the ICC prosecutor, the main ICC prosecutor. Nevertheless, the reactions from Israel, as well as Israel's allies around the world, have been quite strong, where Australia has rejected this out hand. Germany has said that it trusts the ICC judges not to politicize this issue, which it is a political issue. I mean, how do you not politicize this issue of Israel-Palestine to begin with? And then, of course, there's in the middle of all of this, as always, the Palestinian people who are at this time occupied and have been living in perpetual occupation for a very, very long period of time. It is them who most suffer with the situation perpetuating itself in the fashion it is, with the international community not acting enough, at least, to be able to safeguard their lives, really, and their interests and their land. As Israel continues to take ever more land, it continues to build ever more settlements. On the Israeli side, of course, the argument is that, listen, this situation in this fashion cannot move forward. It does not need to be done at the ICC. It needs to be done through a quote-unquote peace deal. Is the deal of the century, as presented by Jared Kushner, the solution? One never knows, of course, but that is at least what the U.S. was pushing for at one point in time. Then the Israelis, of course, argue as well. It's the Palestinians who are resorting to violence. The Palestinians would retort that that's their right, given international law even, about how occupied peoples can react to those who are occupying their lands and even their homes, really, at some level. We'll keep a close eye, of course, on this. If this court case does go through, it has huge implications for how the issue of Israel-Palestine gets resolved, if ever, in the near or long-term future. I'll leave it there for now. I've been Waqar Rizvi. Thanks for watching.